Hi, I'm Debbie Ingram, and this is Town Meeting TV's Under the Dome series. I'm doing a special series on affordability in Vermont, where we're focusing on taxes, housing costs, and income. And today my guests are going to focus on housing costs. They are Jackie and Nate Dagesse, and thank you so much, the two of you, for being here. Jackie and Nate are civil and environmental engineers and general contractors, but we'll find out a little bit more about their background as well. So I know you've done some other things in the housing industry for a while, so maybe you could just tell us a little bit more about your background and what you're doing now.
Sure.
So going to the beginning, Nate and I first met the first day of classes, civil engineering at UVM, and we're both very passionate about the built environment. We've really focused to urban infill redevelopment projects, so focused to urban areas where a site might be underutilized, potentially environmentally compromised. And so those are really challenging, but what's really rewarding about that is you can go from a site that has maybe a single family home and contaminated soils to a completely clean site, 30 new homes for our community, ground floor commercial when we can. We like to include that as well. So there's some really great environmental impacts that we can make happen and also provide new housing for our community.
Yeah, and just to echo, we have a engineering background. We do engineering work through one of our businesses, and then we also do housing development and real estate development as well. So it's both of those things are things we work on day to day.
Terrific. Yeah, so we really appreciate your talking with us here today, because I think our viewers will be very interested in hearing particularly about the steps that you have to go through as for-profit developers to build housing in Vermont, and the costs that are associated with each. Because our viewers will know that we're really experiencing a kind of housing crisis in Vermont. Many people have turned it that. And people's personal experiences are that, our housing costs so much. And why is that? I think it is a question on top of people's minds. So I know you have some information for us that you can kind of walk us through what you have to think about as you're developing a project.
That sounds great. So we've got a bit of a presentation here that just kind of outlines housing costs, and it tries to go through and break down what a real estate development pro forma looks like. So we'll kind of start here in the beginning. This is a sample project, and this is this pro forma, this financial analysis is very similar to what many developers would be looking at to start a project. So this is very similar to how we look at a project. This sample is based on a real world project that we were involved in, so the numbers are very close to accurate. And it just outlines all the different things we have to think about as developers to get a project off the ground. There's a lot of different cost factors to think about. So this project example is a 20-unit building, as you can see here on the spreadsheet. This building, just going to kind of go over some of the high-level details here. This page here is what kind of tells you whether the project's going to work or not. It's going to give you some of the background information on your income projected for the project, your expenses, what the financing looks like. So with this project, with 20 units, you'd be expected to bring in about $630,000 in income, have about $180,000 in expenses, $400,000 in financing costs. So this project example would bring in about $50,000 per year in cash flow. Another thing to note on this example, and we're going to go through some other examples where we move some of the variables around to see how that changes the numbers. But with this example, we're looking at a 6.5% loan rate, and which is it's close to what things are doing today. And then we'll see some of the other variables. And I should note this was modeled off of a 15 one bedroom and a 5 2-bedroom building.
Okay.
So with all that kind of background in the pro forma, you're looking at this project with this example doing a 4% annual cash on cash return. So that's basically comparable to what you would get for a return on your 401k as far as what that metric is. So your 401k, you probably hope to get somewhere between maybe a 5 and a 10%, somewhere in that range. So you can see this cash on cash return is actually a little bit on the low side. As real estate developers, we like to be kind of above maybe what your 401k would be, just because there is a little bit more risk in real estate. So we often would hope for a target, higher than that, between maybe 8 and 12%, somewhere in there. So this example you can already see is on the light side. And we won't spend too much time there because I want to really talk about all of these inputs that go into generating, what your return's going to be, what your cash flow is going to be. And one more thing I will say on this slide is you can see the annual cash flow is $50,000. So this large, $6.5 million project is only producing $50,000 a year in this example, which just isn't quite enough typically for a project like this to move forward. Right. These are the things, Debbie, that these are the items that people always want to learn more about, all the costs that go into a project. I won't necessarily go through each line item, but this again is based off of kind of real world examples of all the different things that go into just the soft cost side of a project, which are basically all the costs before you start construction. So we have to do all these things before we start construction. So you have project management, you have all the different designs. We're typically hiring 5 to 6 design consultants, architectural, civil, geotechnical, structural, MEP, mechanical, electrical, and plumbing. You have our permit fees, the cost of the land, construction interest during construction. That's something people often forget about is during construction you still have to borrow money. Financing costs to close the loan deals, legal costs, marketing costs once the project's ready to be marketed, environmental costs, which, soil cleanup, asbestos abatement, those kinds of things. Construction engineering on site, and some kind of a contingency. So that's an example of an estimated soft cost breakdown for this sample project.
Okay, yeah. So that's $1 million before you even break ground.
That's right. That's right. Yep. So, and again, kind of back to that whole risk thing. A lot of these costs you have to start taking on before you even know for sure if the project's going to work. So developers often have to take some upfront risk and spend some money before they're sure a project can move forward.
Right.
So then we'll get into construction costs. So we had the soft costs, now construction. I won't go into any of this in detail, but you'll see on this one, it came in around $286 per square foot. Which is actually a little bit on the lower end for today's, rising construction costs. So roughly $5.2 million construction cost. So then the pro forma is going to look at the rental income. So the developer is going to look at projecting what the rental income is going to be. On this example, this is a sample. And it's just kind of an example of one way you can structure the rent. But this is on the higher side of rent, kind of just to show how the higher side is still really challenging with the pro forma. So these are modeled at $2,500 one bedrooms and $3,000 two bedrooms. And you can see that those are above the 100% AMI range. So they're 100 to 120% of median income range. So that's on the higher side of rents today. Mm-hmm.
Yes, I had a previous guest that is a not-for-profit developer, and she focused on, very low, and medium. And so, but that was 30%, 50%, and 80% of their median income. And actually, even the low at 80%, I think, would surprise a lot of people that how much income you would have to afford that.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, yes.
All right, so from here, the project's going to have to estimate the operating costs of once the project is complete and operational, because that has to go into the pro forma to understand, annually what your income and expense looks like. And we do have all kinds of data we look at to make sure our numbers and our projections are in the right range. So that's kind of somewhat of a known number as far as like a percentage of the overall revenue, but that's just something we have to do for each project. And then I included this chart. This is the VHFA income threshold chart, and this is what helps you to understand what the rent ranges are. So I've highlighted kind of 3 different rows here to look at. One is the 60% AMI range, which you can see, a 1-bedroom, I'll just compare 1 bedroom. So 1 bedroom's $1,461 at the 60%. That's pretty close to your big A affordable range. That's like the more affordable side of things. And then 85%, I've highlighted that one because that's pretty close to what I think average rents are around urban Chittenden County right now for newer products. And that's a $2,069 1 bedroom. And then I've highlighted the 100% AMI because I think a lot of people are surprised to see how high the 100% AMI rents are. And that's all the way up at $2,435 for a 1 bedroom.
Yes, yeah. I do think I appreciate your sharing these numbers with us, and also Vermont Housing Finance and all the work that they've done on the numbers, because I don't think the average person really understands how how the math works out,
right,
or doesn't work too well. Yes, yeah, that's great. Yeah.
I did want to include just a little bit. There's a lot of ways as real estate developers and professionals that we can get data and try to confirm if our projections are in the right place. There is some data on Zillow's website for rentals. It's called Zori and Zordy. So we track this information. What this helps us to do is understand what the demand and what the average rents are doing in our community, to help us to project into the future on these new projects. So this is a tool we can use. Anyone can use it. It's free. Another thing here is products like the Allen and Brooks and Minor report that we subscribe to. Lots of great data in there for what the market's doing, what are the trends, what are the vacancy rates, how much product's getting built, all kinds of good stuff in there. So we can go into these documents and learn more about the subject, see what's changing as well. And then in that same publication, they also have average construction cost data. And why I put this in the slide here is just to show how expensive construction costs are getting. Our average square foot cost to build now is over $340 a square foot. 10 years ago, it was about $150 a square foot. So it's really skyrocketed, and it's made new projects a real challenge. So we have a couple of just examples of how sensitive the pro forma is to some changes here. And before I dive into this sample, I just want to go back after giving all that background information. On the right-hand side of this screen here, you're going to see again that annual cash flow number, and highlighted in green, that's kind of the easiest way to quickly see if a project makes sense, is that cash on cash return. So we wanted that to be between 7 and 12%. And you can see in this, and we'll go into this example in a minute, we're well under that. So this example is going to be losing money. So in this example, what we did was we brought the rents down to the 100% AMI level. And you can already see with all the costs in on this particular project, which is all the costs that you just saw, this project doesn't even remotely work. So a developer at this point has to go back in and say, how can we get creative? Is there any way to cut costs? Is there any way to increase rents? Is there any way to change the unit mix to help the pro forma? You could pivot and say, are there any grants out there for this type of project? So a number like that says, you have to rethink things. And then another example here is actually bringing down the pricing all the way down to 60% AMI, which you can see drastically, obviously lowers the annual cash flow. You can see you're off by hundreds of thousands of dollars now. And this is just why affordable housing is so challenging, because it big A affordable needs to be subsidized because it's so far in that direction. And then what did we do here? So this one is just a rate sensitivity, just to show. So I mentioned construction costs being a huge factor in why housing is so expensive right now. The loan rate piece is also a big one. We had rates in the 3 to 3.5% for a while through even after 2008, and then even with COVID, most of that time frame, we had really reasonable rates. And now we're in the 6.5 to 7.5% range. So here you can see at 6.5%, back to that original sample, that project has a 3.96% return. Again, those were higher rents, but that's still not quite enough to make things work. But when we bring that loan rate just down to 4.5%, you can see that this project is now in the doable range. So very sensitive to rates, these pro formas, and that's a big unknown right now as to where they're going. So just wanted to show how sensitive that is.
Yes, yeah. Well, it's the cost of money, right?
Yep.
That's what a loan rate is, and,
Yep.
So that has to be factored in for sure.
Yep, exactly.
Yes, Well, this is so helpful. This information, definitely. Is there anything else you wanted to show us about?
I think that was it. The only other note, I did have a few other notes, and one of those was there's a few other costs that do get baked into the construction costs. One of them, and that continue to rise. One of them is efficiency regulations.
Right.
Those regulations tend to increase year over year, and they do start to drive up construction costs. And it's just one of the factors we have to look at to evaluate. So you're going to see in this example, these construction costs reflects today's efficiency regulations, and they will change from time to time. But that is something that does tend to increase year over year and start to increase the project costs. The other one, which we can talk about now, or we can talk about it in the regulation discussion, but there on the permit fee side, we wanted to point out something there. I don't know if you wanted to go over that with
just that the permit fees can vary fairly dramatically between the location and the municipality. And a lot of that depends on where you're building in terms of a designated downtown, a neighborhood development area. We really appreciate all of the time that the regulators and the town officials put towards reviewing our projects. And some of the benefits from that is coming out of that Act 181, where there is no restriction in terms of triggering an Act 250 permit for the number of housing units you can put in a designated downtown. Additionally, 75 units and under in a neighborhood development area. So that significantly helps us in terms of cost and time. So time, really dialing in these variables once we get a go, no go to be a go, knowing how quickly we can go to construction and keep those numbers, and then also the permit fee costs. I also want to mention that the Agency for Commerce and Commercial Development also has a benefit in there in terms of capping the wastewater fees through A&R at $50, which is nice. It's not going to make it or break a go, no go, but in terms of helping with some of the costs overall and reducing the rents. I do want to just reiterate that we really appreciate those land use policies. I'm hopeful that those exemptions from the Act 181 can continue beyond January 1st, 2027, and also just appreciate everything that ACCD has done for these urban areas.
Yes, and we have had some other interviews in this series with some of the folks that have been on the ground working on those changes as you're talking about. So I'm going to encourage viewers to look for some other interviews to get a little more detail on that. But I'm glad to hear that that in terms of your perspective, that those measures that are being taken are helpful, somewhat helpful. And with regard to the clean energy standards and that sort of thing, I've been involved in municipal government, and in the state legislature for years, and we do have these conversations about. I think our public servants are aware that we're always trying to find that right balance between preserving the things that we love about Vermont and making sure that our landscape is beautiful and that we are committed to clean energy use and that kind of thing, versus though how that adds to the cost of a basic need like housing. But we all need to be in conversation. I think
yeah, absolutely.
about that.
And one other thing to point out on these permit fees on this example is the $150,000 permit fees for this 20-unit project are just municipal fees. This project is in an Act 250 exempt area. It's in a designated downtown. So this project doesn't have any Act 250's fees in this estimated cost. We would estimate Act 250 at the $100,000 to $150,000 cost range for a project like this, between all of the work that has to be done to put the permit together and also the fees themselves of the permit. So that's just one note on this example.
Right. Okay. And are there things, specific things that you would like to see changed or improved in the work that municipalities and the state is doing that would make your job easier?
I mean, there's I think a little bit of movement around every corner is probably all we can ask for at this point. There's a lot of important. There's a lot of things we have to look at as far as from the municipal side and from a state side with all the regulations and all the fees. They're there for a reason. But if we can just look at each one and say, what can we do to make this one a little bit less or just a little bit easier to work through? How can we lessen the burden and still get what we need to get out of it on each of these line items? Because I think when we look at all these housing costs, they need to come down a lot, and there's no one bucket that will do that. I think it needs to happen, around every corner, the state level, all the permits with the state, the municipal level, impact fees, inclusionary zoning fees. All of these things should be looked at and say, what benefit are they giving us, and how can we get as efficient as possible on each of those line items? Because I don't think there is a perfect answer to all those questions, but I think if we can look at each one, get efficient, talk about them, understand the pros and cons, we have a chance of lowering the cost of housing. And the other two big ones are construction costs and loan rates. And construction costs, as we talked about, they've gone up a lot. I work, we construction manage our own projects, so we work with the trades all the time. I see exactly what they're going through. It's hard to find new tradespeople. There's more work than there are, skilled workforce. So I don't think there's an easy answer there, but maybe additional training, workforce training, things like that we can look at. And then on the loan rate side, again, there's not much that we can do, at the level we're in, but that's a huge factor. So anything we can do, or at the state level, if there's anything they can do to help with that, that would be huge. But I think it's a little bit around every corner.
Makes sense. Yeah. So, what would you say the prognosis is for housing in Vermont? You've staked your livelihood on it. I presume because you love being here. We all love the state, and but yeah, well, how do you see things kind of unfolding in the future?
Yeah, we love working in this community. We love housing. I think most developers have to be really passionate about it to want to do all this stuff. I think try to be optimistic about it and hope that it's gotten bad enough to where everyone's talking about it, which is why we're all here today, which is great. And again, looking for ways where each bucket can be looked at and we can shave some costs, get creative. We've been looking at maybe some creative rental models with co-housing. It's still new, but what else can we try to do to get creative? And I do think, back to some of the state Act 250 exemptions, those are really helpful. Reducing other zoning burdens like how many vehicles are required, what the parking needs are, that can be helpful. So I think I'm optimistic, but I know there's a lot of work, and there isn't an easy answer. It's going to take collaboration from everybody. And I do think we are I think we're actually at an inflection point now. I think from COVID until now, we saw prices just start to skyrocket. We're starting to see that tenants have said this is as high as we can go. We can't keep seeing these increases. We're seeing that now with rental demand. So I think, which hopefully is a good thing. Hopefully now, there's even more of a reason for everybody to say we gotta reduce these costs somehow. Renters just cannot afford it, and homeowners too. But mostly this, we're looking at renters.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I just want to say thank you so much, Debbie, for your time, for Under the Dome, because you're really doing the hard work of bringing the people together, bringing the information so that people have transparency and can have these conversations to enact some of the changes that needs discussing. So thank you so much.
No, well, I appreciate that. Thank you. Yeah, we try to get some good information out so people can really understand the whole picture. So appreciate that. Well, I'd like to close with asking you the same question I've been asking all my guests, which is, this is a series on affordability. So how do you define affordability? And you can interpret that any way you want and focus it or make it bigger or however you
You
want.
mentioned big A and little
Yeah.
A affordability a little bit, so I'll let you speak to that.
Yeah, I mean, that's a tough thing to answer, but I look at affordable, big A affordable as subsidized housing in the 60% AMI range, and then I look at market rate housing as what the average median person can afford from day to day, which I think is actually a little bit below 100% AMI. I think it's probably like 85 to 95% AMI.
And you think that just based on market demand?
Yeah, just based on what we're seeing in the market. I mean, we have a pretty good gauge of the market, and then also we have all these resources. The goal would be that everyone, depending on their income level, can find a home and not spend more than that 30% per year on housing. So that's certainly the goal, and to me that would mean affordable for everyone. So I guess that's my definition.
Yep. Sounds good. Great. Well, I've been speaking with Nate and Jackie Dagesse, and really want to thank you for coming. Appreciate all the information that you've shared with us. And so this is another in our series of Under the Dome, focusing on affordability. And I hope that you will look on Town Meeting TV's website or YouTube channel to see all of the interviews that we've done. So see you next time.